Okay, so thinking about images to represent our flip learning. Um, the one that stuck out most was one that I had on the screen previously that Bergman had. But I was looking for more, and um, what struck me was that each one of the presenters used a kind of a whiteboard. Bergman used a blackboard, but and so I was like, all right, well, here's my version of a whiteboard. And so let me kind of walk you through my thinking here. And so, as I had mentioned before, this will be lesson two of this particular unit, and we're looking at that broad theme of population growth in the age of empires, and specifically, what are the causes of this population growth, and then what are the consequences. And so, as we had talked about before, the individual time, it, there will be a lecture over these components, and students would watch that in their individual time. So probably at home for at least the CP and honors kids, and then there would be a quiz, a short quiz I would give through Google Form, just as a way of holding kids accountable for actually watching the material. And then our group time, I would like to take that panoramic view of the big theme and then bring it down to kind of a close-up view of one of two empires. And so my thinking here is that I'm going to create a teacher example of this final project. And I'm going to use two well-known empires in my example, the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. My thinking behind that is because I've used these empires, I don't want any other kid to use it, right? So that they don't just take my work and copy it. But also, I would like to use those two empires kind of as a case study for this kind of close up view in lessons two and probably lessons three as well. And so here's kind of what I envision is that the kids have watched and they have an idea about population and why it exploded exponentially and why and the consequences that came from that. And so some of the consequences that are going to emerge that kids will learn about are environmental, like deforestation, um, the idea that complex societies are going to become more complex because there's more people, the idea that collective learning is going to increase, and that more people are starting to live in cities. Not that more people lived in cities at this time, but that size of cities are increasing. Like, for example, the city of Rome was in excess of 1 million people, which is pretty big for the ancient world. And so they're going to look at each one of these individual consequences of population growth in a specific station. And so what I'm thinking is that there would be 4 different stations, and then each one would have a different resource for Rome and a different resource for Persia that pertain to one of these consequences. And the idea being that students would have to either read through this primary source or look at this video or read this article and then understand that, okay, we just talked about the idea of collective learning increasing. So what are some of the things that we see in this video that show that Rome is benefiting from collective learning? Or we just talked about the idea that cities are becoming larger. And so in this particular primary source, I'm looking through and I'm learning about this particular individual, and they're talking about aqueducts and how that ties into how this city could become so massive because they were able to move their water around in such a way. So basically taking the information, the knowledge that they learned in this short video, and then transferring it to a specific empire. And again, if we go back to the objectives that I had pointed out in the last slide, this really gets at, one, being able to have that skill or practice that skill, because that's a skill that they're going to need to have to be successful when they go to work on that final summative project. So most ninth graders don't have the ability to just, do that kind of sophisticated research all on their own. In fact, it's usually a kind of a stressful thing, right? So if we don't scaffold that, and I think this is a great example of scaffolding, because we're going to practice that skill with some teacher supplied resources and varied resources. So maybe some video media, maybe an article, maybe a primary source. And so now I feel a little more confident. And so usually, if you tell kids, okay, so let's do some research, the first thing they're going to do is go to Google and type in the question, what collective learning was there in the Roman Empire? Like something that would garner zero quality results. And so, this I think will be very helpful. And so, as they're going around to these different stations, they would be filling out a graphic organizer, and that is kind of how we would facilitate that particular class, or our group time together, our group space together. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts right now on this, and I'm sure that it will morph and change as I continue to kind of play with this, the concept, and going back to the unit objectives, and trying to hit those. Anyway, thank you.